Hello again, everybody. This is Wild Bill from Comic Book Geezers. This is another episode. We're focusing on Daredevil and my sidekick.
I'm Pete. How are you? Good. Thanks for joining us.
So we're going to talk about Daredevil and focus on the TV show from Netflix, the first two seasons. And Pete knows a little bit more about the actors and stuff, and who's involved, who the players are. So I'll kick it over to Pete.
Yeah, so I mean, a little bit of background. So that was the first Daredevil season was a way to kick off the Marvel TV universe, or whatever the hell you want to call it.
2015 it came out?
Yeah, on Netflix. So they did Daredevil Season 1.
Which was like 13 episodes, I believe.
13 episodes, yeah.
And same thing for the second season.
Yeah, and they followed that up. And, since then they've also done Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and recently Iron Fist. And then they're all going to join forces. It's going to debut, I think, next week on Netflix.
The
Defenders, yeah. But we're going to specifically talk about the Daredevil series because we both really like
the comics.
And the
well,
comic,
we'll get to those, but we're going to talk about the show first. And
so the show is very dark, action-packed, really dark, I thought, for Marvel. And I like that because, there are times, I love all the Marvel movie stuff and the shows, but sometimes they're very lighthearted.
I think they had to do it for this character, for the show, to keep the fans' interest. The younger generation wants to see a lot more action.
There's plenty of it.
The comic books in the early 70s, he's kind of tame compared to the TV show. But yeah, as Pete mentioned, very, very dark. He gets his butt kicked a lot, which makes him more believable because Daredevil really doesn't have any superpowers.
No.
If you know the origin of Daredevil, he was a child near a truck accident. Radiation spills, and it gets on him. It gets in his eyes, and he gets blind. But from the blindness, the radiation, which always was an excuse for superpowers in the world of the Marvel Universe, the radiation gives him the sonar ability. So he's blind, but he also learns martial arts, and he's an acrobat. So those really are not really superpowers, other than the radar. With his senses, most people who are blind have extra keen senses. Their sense of smell, their sense of touch, their hearing especially.
Yeah, he turned all that to his advantage.
And so when I was a kid, I always kind of thought that Daredevil was kind of like Marvel's flip side of DC's Batman.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because, again, Batman doesn't really have any superpowers. He's really a good athlete and good martial artist, good at fighting. And Daredevil...
Good detective.
Yes, and Daredevil is kind of like Marvel's version of Batman in a sense. And the fact that he was their first blind superhero.
Yeah, and a lawyer to boot, Matt Murdock.
Yeah, and so the character... A lot of people, again, when Stan Lee thought of Daredevil, just like similar fashion when he thought of Spider-Man, the powers that be above Stan Lee didn't think that a blind superhero was a worthy endeavor. And they were wrong.
They were wrong.
And ironically, some of the biggest fans were blind people. And they thought it was about time that it was a blind superhero, somebody that they could relate to. And the popularity of Daredevil really just took off. And he was invented in the 60s. And so I don't know if Pete wants to talk more about the Netflix show.
And one of the major differences, again, I think they really captured the character very well on Netflix. The one thing, if you're a fan at all of especially the early Daredevil stuff, he was a jokester. So always when he was fighting the villains and whatever, he would always throw out all sorts of puns and jokes and things like that. They don't really go that direction with the TV show. So you've got Charlie Cox. Plays Matt Murdock / Daredevil on the show. And some of you might remember Charlie from Boardwalk Empire on HBO. He actually is an Irish actor, so he did a very good job of keeping his accent in check. We've also got, the Foggy Nelson was played by Eldon Henson. Very well. I thought that actor did a great job.
He fit the character very well.
Really
I thought he did an excellent job.
So they started up this little law firm, right? And then they hired Karen Page as the secretary, who was played by Deborah Ann Wall, who some of you will remember from True Blood, also on HBO. She's a fantastic and beautiful actress. And the three of them create this struggling, law firm. What's it called?
And they're also
Murdoch
kind of like
and Nelson,
family,
right?
in a sense.
Exactly.
Which makes it the appeal.
But then, of course, Matt Murdock and Karen wind up. There's an attraction there, and they fall for each other, so on and so forth. But and the rest of the cast is rounded out by Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays Wilson Fisk, who they actually never call the Kingpin on the show, but he is the Kingpin, and I thought he did a tremendous job.
I think that in all cinematic history of the character Daredevil, he is the best Kingpin ever to play the role.
Hell yeah.
I don't think anyone will top him.
No.
The first time I ever saw him was in Full Metal Jacket, where he played Private Pile, and he gets picked on through that movie. And
he was in Men in Black as well.
He has really evolved. Full Metal Jacket came out in 1987. So here you are 28 years later in 2015, he's playing the Kingpin, and it's just an outstanding performance.
Very reserved, and just very calm and controlled.
Very confident.
But when he gets pissed off on the show, he's furious, and that's a side you always saw of the Kingpin in the comics.
He played the Kingpin very, very well, I thought. And he deserved to win the role, and I think he knocked it out of the park. He did. He was exceptional.
Yeah. So then you got Rosario Dawson as Claire Temple. Okay, very popular character in Marvel. She also appears on the Luke Cage show. In fact, she was also in the Luke Cage comic quite a bit. We've got Elodie Young. I'm not familiar with her as an actress, but she played Elektra. John Bernthal played the Punisher in Season 2, and we'll talk a bit about that. And then Scott Glenn played Stick, who was kind of like Matt Murdock's sensei.
Yeah, his martial arts instructor.
So you got this good cast, and Season 1, again, very dark, more of an introductory. In fact, he doesn't actually wear the Daredevil costume.
They show the evolution of the character. So he acquires his senses, his skills, and little by little he works on his costume.
Yeah, he goes out at night and does all this, this vigilante
he's basically
stuff.
dressed in black in the beginning. He doesn't have the red suit. He's like busting up drug transactions and illegal arms and weapons.
And the Asian mob, he gets to running with them.
And then he finally meets this inventor who's under pressure from the evil people, and Daredevil gets him to get some of his technology for him, and he designs the Billy Club for him. Some body armor.
Has a little romance with Claire Temple, She's a nurse. That doesn't last too long. And she winds up, the more of the story continues on. And
she's like a little too crazy, but he's not really telling her who he is. But she's kind of putting the pieces together by reading what's going on in the news. Because every time he's breaking up a crime, it's making the news. The cops obviously think he's a vigilante, so they're after Daredevil as well. So that pretty much, I think the show is an excellent show.
Some great action sequences.
There's I think the second season even evolves a little bit more, but I think it was very, very well done. Yeah. I like it better, the 2 seasons, I like better than the movie that came out in early 2003.
Yeah, which isn't bad.
With Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck.
Yeah, it's actually not a bad movie. Maybe he wasn't a great choice for that role.
I thought it was a good movie for because I'm a Daredevil fan, but a lot of people kick it to the curb. But I think the TV show from Netflix passes the quality of the movie.
And most people agree that the introduction of the Punisher into the Daredevil storyline on Season 2 was extremely well done, and that John Bernthal, whom many will remember from The Walking Dead, did a knockout performance of the Punisher. Again. Much better than any other guy who played the Punisher previously. And there have been movies, been a few of them. But I think, and they're he's going to have his own show because of this. But I think it was very, very well done. Not only his battles with Daredevil in the show, but also his battle with the Kingpin later on, which is very well done.
As you all know, the Punisher is a vigilante. He's not a hero, and he's out to kill his opponents.
Not a great guy.
But he doesn't want to bring them to justice. That's his form of justice, death penalty.
His justice.
Correct.
Yeah. I didn't like my one negative thing about the Daredevil shows, and it's centered on Season 2, is I really didn't like the Elektra storyline. I thought it really dragged down Season 2, and they did most of the electric stuff on those middle episodes. A, I didn't really like the actress who played her. B, I thought that they made Matt Murdock kind of like he just he kept saying it's like, well, I'm done with her. You're out of my life, whatever. But he kept going back. So he kept going back. He couldn't get over her. Meanwhile, he's got Karen Page, who's totally in love with him, and he's got feelings for her too. And he just basically was like, oh, I got to put you aside because Elektra, I can't get her out of my head. And I couldn't wait for them to get rid of her on the show, and they did kill her off late in the season.
Oops, spoiler.
Oops, if you didn't see it, sorry, fucked up. Oh well.
It's okay.
But overall, great stuff. And then, obviously, if you watch the Jessica Jones and the Luke Cage and the Iron Fist shows, you can kind of see how they're all kind of meeting. And Claire Temple's in all of them. So she's kind of like, holds the glue that keeps all these shows together. And then we've got Defenders coming up, which you got to get caught up on all this stuff because you're a little behind.
Yes.
He doesn't get out much.
I live in a paper bag.
But anyway, sometimes really well done.
No news is good news, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So now I think we should flip it over to the comics.
Yes.
So we'll kick it over with Pete because he has a lot of post-100
pre-100
Daredevils. Yes, I mean pre.
You're doing.
I'm post-100.
I'm pre. You're post.
That's right.
So yeah, we wanted to kind of give a quick little flavor of kind of what some of these looked like way back in the day. So I've got a bunch that have come out prior to issue number 100, so I want to show them off. So the oldest one I have is issue number 12, and this is it's like a 2 or 3, I think, a 3 or 4 issue storyline with Kazar.
Kazar, another popular Marvel character. You usually don't see Kazar with such short hair. Kazar's kind of like Marvel's version of Tarzan.
He had a nice haircut before this issue, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. His hair was used to be... All the
shorter
issues I have of Kazar, he's got long hair. But I'll take it. It's the old, early 60s, right? These are 12-cent books?
12 cents, yeah, late 60s, yeah. So this storyline continues. I don't know if I have issue... I don't think I have issue number 13. But anyway, here's issue number 14, where Daredevil's fighting the Plunderer, who actually turns out to be the half-brother of Kazar.
Kazar.
Kind of cool.
That's Kazar's last name, right?
Yep.
Plunder.
And speaking of Kazar, he's back again for issue number 24. I just love this cover, so I had to bring this one. All right.
And he's wearing street clothes there.
Wearing street clothes, and obviously, yeah, they're fighting. I'm trying to remember.
Kazar's I have, he's wearing like a loincloth like Tarzan.
Yep.
He doesn't have the saber-toothed tiger with him in these issues.
I think he's in there,
but
they don't show him on the cover. Yeah, they don't show him on the cover. In this one, in issue 24, he's actually in a castle, and the tiger's with him in the castle.
But, saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah. So here we're going to jump to issue number 29. This is kind of notable. The Man Without Fear, Unmasked.
Uh-oh. And identity crisis there.
So this is about the time where he tries to trick everybody, and he says that Daredevil is actually my identical twin brother, Mike Murdock, right? That really didn't go.
Nobody's buying it.
They did for a little while. From there, number 34, this is a very famous Daredevil villain called the Beetle, who actually fought some other Marvel characters.
I have later on. He fought Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yeah, exactly. Kind of a cool character. He had these like little things with suction
cup fingers.
So here we have I kind of like this character, this villain. He started off as Paste Pot Pete, later known as the Trapster. He was part of the Frightful Four, fought the Fantastic Four quite a bit, as well as Daredevil here.
And he was the leader of that pack. He was like the brains of the operation.
Or at least he thought he was.
The Trapster.
Yeah. Sandman was also part of it.
I forgot the other guys. I have a few issues with them.
They popped up all over the place early on, yeah. So now we go 2 issues later, and we've actually shown this one before. And not only is it a great cover, it's kind of a cool story arc where Dr. Doom kind of takes control of Daredevil to do his bidding.
Great cover. Great arc. Anything with Dr. Doom
and I believe awesome, this is... I believe this is Gene Colan.
Issue 37?
Because Gene Colan was doing a lot of the Daredevil artwork, like from, I think he does all these last ones I've showed you, this one as well. So here we have issue number 39, where he fights the Unholy Three. It's kind of a cool one. So there's still 12 centers. And then we just talked about the introduction of my twin brother Mike Murdock as Daredevil. Well, why don't we get rid of him then? The death of Mike Murdock, right? That didn't last too long. So... And then my last old one here that I'm going to show you, which is kind of cool because it's the debut, and Bill's going to show you more about this villain of the Jester. This is number 42, also a very cool cover by Mr. Gene Colan. All right, and then from number 42, we're going to shoot up. We're going to go post 100. So
this is 102, and I picked this one because it's got Spider-Man in it. But this is a 20 center, so this is probably either 1972, maybe 1973.
And you'll notice here the introduction of the Black Widow.
Yes, and I think they brought that in somewhere in the 90s, issues in the 90s.
I believe so.
But yes.
Right around that same time, they were doing that a lot. So they did that with Captain America also.
Captain America and Falcon.
So
the Daredevil was teamed up with the Black Widow. A couple issues later, 116, you don't see it anymore. It's just Daredevil.
But she's there. And she's there.
He's fighting the Owl, which is a classic
Daredevil
villain that always goes against Daredevil. Then I move on to 122, and I love this cover. I've had this in my collection for years. This is one of my originals in my Daredevil collection. I didn't have a lot, but this is what started me off, and I just love this cover. And this is issue 122.
And another note, not only were Daredevil and Black Widow teaming up, but they actually were an item for a while.
Oh, yes, that's true. He used to get around. He was like...
he did.
He got
Boy, that blind lawyer guy, he got around.
He did. I picked this one because of Bullseye, who was obviously a classic villain in the Ben Affleck movie.
Yeah.
But Bullseye is a constant, reoccurring villain in Daredevil's life.
A thorn in his side.
Yes, this is issue 131. Great artwork. This is a 25 center. This is probably from 1975.
Actually, not a thorn in his side, a dart in his side.
Yeah, anything he could throw would be a weapon, basically. Moving on, this is probably 1976. This is issue 137. The Jester was also a common villain. I think Pete had a few of those. There he is. Great cover. I need 138, but they want like 15
That's a
bucks
30
for it.
center, so that's what, about 70?
1976. Yeah, that's what I said. This one is probably 1977. I don't know if you can read in the dark there, but I'm pretty sure. I love this cover because it's the old costume versus the current Daredevil costume. For those of you who know anything about Daredevil, his father was a boxer, and the mob always wanted him to take a dive, but he wouldn't. He kind of like Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta, would not go down.
So who we got down here? That's Cap right there. That's Hercules, and is that Black Widow right there?
It could be. I'm not sure.
I wonder if
and that looks like Matt Murdock in the background.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting.
In the ring there, it could be his father. But great cover with a clash of two old uniforms.
Actually, right around that time, I believe. I'm trying to think. Hercules was in the. Was he in the Champions? At
the
that?
Champions,
yeah,
and that was out at this time. And moving along, Frank Miller took over in 158 doing the artwork. And by this time, I believe he was writing it. And this one is kind of like a flashback to the death of his father. A great cover. His father, obviously the fighter, the boxer, gets shot and killed. And this cover kind of is like a flashback of that story. And this is what I had. I have said this before. I had a subscription when I was a teenager. Marvel gave me a deal. I had Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the Hulk for 3 years, and in the fourth year they said if you renew these 3 titles, pick a fourth one free, and so I picked Daredevil, and it happened to be during the Frank Miller run. He was already 5 issues into it. But this was part of that 12-issue subscription, and this is the original first Elektra. If you can find this one, this is considered like a holy grail because it's the first appearance of Elektra. I'm not sure what the value is, but it's worth something. My books, if you notice, when I show them, they're usually in good condition. I took good care of my comics. I prefer them to be better issues. This is 175, which was the end of my Frank Miller run, I believe, or 176. But I love this cover. It's not really the death of Elektra. I think she dies.
They resurrected her, yeah.
Well, she died. I think she originally dies in 191, I think. There's a cover with Daredevil hugging a tombstone, but I don't think she dies in this issue. It's been 30 years since I read these, and I didn't do my homework. But again, another Daredevil issue, Frank Miller. I picked this up at a Comic-Con last year, or actually a few months ago, actually. This was, I think I got this for $1, and this would probably easily go for 15 to 20 bucks, depending on where you find it. But
it's a bargain.
Yes, so I jumped on it, and so that wraps up Daredevil. So we're going to kick it off and wrap up and end with favorite covers. So we're going to stay in line with the character again. So we'll let Pete do some of his.
Yeah, and
he's got quite a few.
I pulled a few more than I normally do. I'll just run through them real quick. So here's number...
They're all good.
57, another unmasking of Daredevil in front of his beloved Karen Page. Right?
Oh, no!
Oh, no! You are Daredevil!
Say it isn't so!
Say it isn't so! I love this. So here we got the Stunt Master. A good villain who later became kind of a cool character. Showed up in Ghost Rider, of course. Okay. That's number 64. Number 88, we got Kilgrave, the Purple Man, who's notable for being on the Jessica Jones TV series.
That up a little.
But also a...
bring that in there.
Yeah.
The Purple Man.
The Purple Man, Kilgrave.
Good cover.
Yeah, very.
Kind of like it.
Another famous villain.
This one I like.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, Electro. So to see him cross over to fight Daredevil is something definitely cool to see.
Yeah.
You know? Great cover. And this one I have as well in my collection.
Number 98. Black Widow.
Definitely cool.
Yeah.
Definitely good cover. So for me, for favorite covers, I'm a little bit higher up the ladder. I love this cover. This is issue 130. And, you know, this skeleton, and I just love it. It's got a horror theme to it, you know.
A little voodoo. There's like the little mini Daredevil string the
hanging by the noose, you know, and it's a skeleton. I just think it's a great cover. This is probably from 1975. Moving up to probably 1977. This is the last Daredevil prior to Frank Miller taking over. This is issue 157. And the Deathstalker, I believe is his name, is this character reappears many times in throughout Daredevil's history. And this is by Gene Colan, the artwork, who did Tomb of Dracula.
And again, there's Black Widow, Hercules, and Captain America, so we saw in the other issue with the two Daredevils fighting each other.
But Gene Colan was the artist for this cover. Yep. He didn't do the inside artwork, but he has that Tomb of Dracula kind of look to the Deathstalker's appearance. Now, I've shown this before, but I don't think I've shown it as a favorite cover. Daredevil versus the Hulk. Great cover. I just love this artwork on this
Not
cover.
a fair fight.
You know, and just the shadowing is I just think this cover it speaks volumes. This should be a poster. I love this cover. This is probably one of my favorite Daredevil covers of post 100 issues. And that pretty much wraps up.
And you can't see it by this picture, but he's probably so scared that the Hulk has come out, he's probably taking a steaming you-know-what right behind there.
But yes, you know, the Hulk is, you know, pretty mad. And that wraps up my edition of Favorite Covers. This is Wild Bill signing off, saying thank you for joining us for another episode of Comic Book Geezers. And we'll be back with you soon again, but I'm not sure what we're going to do. We have to kick some ideas around, but we have to talk about Captain America. We haven't done Spider-Man yet. That may take us 5 episodes to get through all those books.
And the Hulk.
The Hulk, another 5 episodes, easy. Iron Man, another long, drawn-out segments we could do, because I have a lot of Iron Man.
And we're plotting an episode, a horror episode, where we're probably going to talk about Werewolf by Night and Man-Thing and maybe Frankenstein monsters. So that's cool. Coming up as well. And Bill's got all sorts of old 60s like horror issues.
Early 70s.
Yeah.
And then there's a Comic-Con coming up next month, and Pete is kind of trying to talk about that, about us maybe going on location and shoot. I'm trying to keep my mouth shut about it, because I don't know if they'll shoot us down when we get there. Like, hey, what are you guys doing with the camera? I would rather go in and spring it on some of our vendors that we deal with. Hey, look, man, we want to tape a little segment, and then see if they're game for it, because I don't want to get your hopes up on it and then have them shoot us down, you know, because there's celebrities at some of these things, and if they see us walking around with a camera, they might freak and think we're, you know, trademark infringement. So
we'll see. We're going to attempt it.
We're going to try. You know. Anyway, that wraps up Comic Book Users. Again, I'm Wild Bill saying thanks for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
And I'm Pete. Have a good one. Take care.
All right, thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.